Have you ever felt like life keeps showing you the same lesson, just wearing a different mask? The same kinds of people, the same disappointments, the same emotions that never really go away, no matter how much you change on the outside? It's almost as if reality is stuck on repeat, like you're trapped in a loop that only you can't see. But what if that loop isn't punishment? What if it's precision, your own mind, trying again and again to show you something you've refused to see? Carl Jung once said, "Until you make the unconscious conscious, it will direct your life, and you will call it fate." What if your so-called fate is really just your psyche, speaking through the events of your life, a pattern repeating until you finally understand it? In this film, we're going to step inside that mystery to explore why life keeps repeating itself and what happens the moment you truly see it. Because the moment awareness enters the pattern, the repetition ends. You awaken not by escaping the loop, but by realizing you were the loop all along. This is Until You See This. Life will keep repeating itself. Have you ever felt like your life keeps looping? Different faces, different places, but somehow the same story keeps finding you again? You promise yourself this time will be different, yet the same emotions return wearing new masks. The same argument, the same heartbreak, the same fear of being unseen, unchosen, unfulfilled. It's like your life has a hidden script that keeps rewriting itself until you finally read what it's trying to say. Jung called this the repetition of the unconscious, the way the mind plays the same movie until you realize you're the one projecting it. It's not punishment, it's a message. Every repeated pattern in your life is life itself saying, "You haven't seen this yet." The universe isn't testing you, it's reflecting you. And until you see what's being shown, you'll keep mistaking reflection for reality. Think of the last time something familiar happened again. The same kind of person disappointed you. The same opportunity slipped through your fingers. The same inner storm rose up even though everything around you had changed. You might have called it bad luck or fate. But what if it's precision? What if life is built like a mirror maze every turn, showing you another angle of the same unseen wound? This is the secret nobody tells you. Nothing in your life is random. Every repetition is your psyche knocking at the door of your awareness, asking to be seen. The situation might change, but the emotion beneath it never lies. That's the clue. The story only loops where you are still blind. It's easy to blame the world, to think the problem is out there, the job, the friend, the system, the partner. But the pattern always begins where you do. Life is not something happening to you. It's something happening through you. When you start seeing your life this way, the loop becomes less of a trap and more of a teacher. Imagine standing in front of a mirror, angry at your reflection. You shout, you cry, you try to change it, but the reflection doesn't move until you do. That's how reality works. Until you change the one who's looking, the reflection can only repeat. Most people never see this. They keep running from the mirror, changing scenery, changing people, chasing new beginnings that are really old endings in disguise. They think they've escaped, but the pattern travels with them because it lives inside them. The only way out of the loop is in. When you start to notice the déjà vu moments of your life, don't dismiss them. That eerie feeling that you've been here before isn't just coincidence. It's consciousness trying to wake up inside you. Every repeat is an invitation to awareness. Because the truth is, life will keep repeating itself until you see what it's been showing you all along. That the world isn't something to be fixed or escaped. It's your own reflection, waiting to be understood. And the moment you truly see that, the loop doesn't need to repeat anymore. Every person you meet is a mirror. Some reflect your beauty, some your pain, some the parts of yourself you've tried your whole life not to see. You think you're meeting different people, but in truth, you're meeting yourself in different disguises. The friend who inspires you, the stranger who annoys you, the partner who wounds you, they all carry fragments of your own unconscious self, walking around outside you so that you can finally notice what's inside you. Jung discovered that we never really see others as they are. We see them as we are. The mind projects its hidden content outward, turning people into screens for our inner world. That's why one person can remind you of home, while another makes you feel small for no clear reason. It's not about them, it's about what they awaken in you. The person who makes you angry might carry a part of your shadow. The one who fascinates you might hold a part of your light. Think about someone who triggers you. Maybe they talk too loudly, seem too confident, or always need to be right. It's easy to think they're the problem. But if you look deeper, that irritation is your psyche saying, "This is your lesson." What you reject in them lives quietly in you. The reason it hurts is because you've spent years trying to bury that same trait. You see it out there because you won't see it in here. The mirror is merciless, but it's never cruel. And what about those people you can't stop thinking about, the ones who feel magnetic, almost fated? That's projection too. You're seeing your own unlived potential shining through someone else. The courage you've denied, the love you've withheld, the creativity you've ignored, all of it finds its way to you through the faces of others. You don't fall in love with a person. You fall in love with the reflection of your own soul that they unknowingly carry. It's strange when you realize this. You start to notice that everyone around you is an actor in the play of your own psyche. The critic, the admirer, the savior, the villain, they're all roles in the same story, written by your unconscious. You meet them not to judge or worship, but to remember. Each one holds a message from within. The world changes when you begin to see this. Instead of taking everything personally, you start taking it symbolically. The question shifts from, "Why did they do this to me?" to, "What part of me are they showing me?" And that single question can turn conflict into clarity, pain into revelation. It doesn't mean people don't have their own stories, they do. But the version of them you experience is your creation. Everyone lives inside their own mirror, and together, we're all reflections, bouncing off reflections, trying to see ourselves clearly. When you finally understand that the mirror behind every face is your own, something miraculous happens. Judgment softens into curiosity. Anger turns into awareness. You stop fighting with others because you realize you were only ever fighting with yourself. Everything you see is a projection. Your mind is the unseen projector, and the world is just the screen. Every image, every sound, every moment you call reality is light passing through the lens of your psyche. What you think you're seeing out there is really being created in here. Jung said that the unconscious doesn't just live inside us, it builds the world we see. The outer world is not separate from your inner one. It's a living mirror of it. Your beliefs, your fears, your expectations, they shape how reality appears. When you feel unloved, the world starts to look cold. When you feel unworthy, opportunities seem to hide. When you begin to heal, the same world suddenly feels alive again. Nothing outside changed. The projector did. It's hard to believe this at first. The ego wants to say, "No, things just happen. Life is random." But randomness is only what the unconscious looks like before you understand it. Every scene that plays out in your life has meaning, even the painful ones. especially the painful ones. They are your psyche trying to show you the film you're running on repeat. Imagine sitting in a dark theater, watching a movie that makes you cry or rage. You could scream at the screen, but it wouldn't change what's being shown. The image is coming from behind you, from the projector you can't see. That's what life is like. You think the story on the screen is the problem, the people, the situations, the chaos, but all of it is light passing through the patterns of your mind. Until you turn around and look at the projector itself, you're stuck inside the movie. That's why certain themes keep returning. Not because fate is cruel, but because your psyche is patient. It will keep showing you the same story until you realize you're the one writing the script. Every heartbreak, every loss, every failure is a message from the director within, trying to bring something unconscious into the light of awareness. When you begin to see this, you stop blaming the movie. You start studying it. You ask different questions. Instead of, why is this happening to me? You wonder, what story is this revealing about me? The shift seems small, but it changes everything. Life stops feeling like punishment and starts feeling like communication. You can't turn off the projector. Projection is part of being human. But you can become conscious of it. You can learn to watch your own movie with curiosity instead of fear. When you do, the same scenes that once broke you start to make sense. The chaos begins to form a pattern, and the pattern begins to tell a story. Your story seen clearly for the first time. And once you realize you're the projector, not just the audience, you stop trying to control the screen. You start adjusting the light. There's always that one thing that keeps coming back. The same argument that never ends. The same type of person who hurts you. The same failure that appears in a different form every few years. You call it bad luck, bad timing, or maybe even fate, but it isn't any of those. It's the pattern that won't let go, because it's not finished teaching you what it came to show. Jung said, "The unconscious repeats what the conscious mind refuses to see." Life is patient like that. It doesn't punish. It reminds. When something keeps happening again and again, it's not because the universe hates you. It's because your psyche is holding up a sign that says, "Look here, you've missed something." And until you see it, the pattern will keep looping, like a song that refuses to end because you haven't learned its melody. You can change cities, change friends, change lovers, change everything about your life, but the same story follows you. That's how you know it isn't out there. The scenery keeps shifting, but the emotional script stays the same. Maybe you always feel abandoned. Maybe you always end up the rescuer. Maybe you always lose what you love, right when you start to trust it. The roles can swap, but the feeling at the center never lies. That feeling is the message trying to reach you. It's easy to call these patterns curses, as if life is mocking you. But the truth is more compassionate. The pattern is the psyche's way of saying, this is where you're asleep. Every repetition is your own unconscious asking to be recognized. The pain doesn't repeat to destroy you. It repeats to wake you. There's a moment in everyone's life when the pattern becomes undeniable. The mask falls off, and you can finally see that the story you've been blaming on others has your own handwriting all over it. That moment can hurt. It feels like betrayal, but it's actually freedom. Because once you see the pattern, you can stop living it. Awareness ends repetition. When you understand that the so-called curse is communication, everything shifts. The heartbreak becomes a map of your hidden needs. The failure becomes feedback from your deeper intelligence. The chaos becomes a mirror reflecting where you've lost your center. Nothing changes on the surface, yet everything feels different. Because you're no longer a victim of the pattern, you're a participant in its revelation. The pattern that won't let go isn't against you. It's the part of you that loves you enough to keep trying. It's the inner teacher disguised as chaos, the wound that keeps knocking until you open the door. And when you finally do, you realize it never wanted to hurt you. It only wanted to be seen. Every emotion you try to hide has a way of signing its name across your life. You recognize it in the people who annoy you, the ones who make you jealous, the ones you can't stand for reasons you can't explain. You think they're the problem, but what you're really reacting to is your own shadow, the parts of yourself you've rejected, now wearing someone else's face. The shadow isn't evil. It's just everything about you that you decided wasn't acceptable. The anger you were told was wrong. The pride you were told was arrogance. The sensitivity you were told was weakness. You buried these pieces to survive, but they didn't disappear. They live on in your unconscious, waiting for a way back into your awareness. When you won't invite them in, life sends them to you through other people. That's why some people seem to get under your skin so easily. The loud coworker, the show-off, the one who always plays the victim. They touch something raw inside you because they're reflecting a part of you that you've disowned. You see it, hate it, and want to push it away. But what you're really rejecting is your own reflection. The irritation is your clue. It's the shadow knocking at the door of your mind saying, "This too is you." Jealousy works the same way. You envy someone not because they have something you can't, but because they're living a part of you that you've suppressed. The friend who speaks their truth freely, the stranger who walks with confidence, the artist who risks failure, they stir something inside you because you're watching your own unlived life. The jealousy isn't small or shameful. It's guidance. It's your psyche saying, "This is your potential," calling back to you. Judgment is the most common disguise of the shadow. We use it to feel safe. When you judge someone else harshly, you temporarily protect yourself from seeing that same energy within. But the more you judge, the more power the shadow gains. What you refuse to own controls you from the dark. Jung said, "Until you make the unconscious conscious, it will direct your life, and you will call it fate." The shadow is that unconscious force. It shapes your reactions, your relationships, your choices. But when you start to see your emotional triggers as mirrors instead of enemies, the power shifts. The moment you can say, "This anger, this jealousy, this judgment, it's mine," you take back what was lost. Owning your shadow doesn't make you darker. It makes you whole. The light can't expand without meeting what it once denied. Every irritation, every envy, every judgment is an invitation to remember yourself. The handwriting on the wall of your life has always been your own, written by the parts of you still waiting to be loved. Long before you could understand what pain meant, it was already shaping you. Every child experiences a moment when love feels uncertain, when safety breaks, when being fully yourself doesn't seem welcome. That moment becomes the invisible wound that starts writing your story. It doesn't matter how big or small it looked from the outside, the psyche doesn't measure size, only impact. What hurt you early didn't just happen once. It planted a pattern that quietly directs the rest of your life. Jung said that what we do not make conscious repeats itself as fate. The wound becomes the author of repetition. It decides what kind of people you're drawn to, what risks you avoid, what you think you deserve. If love once felt like walking on eggshells, you'll chase people who make you earn affection. If being unseen kept you safe, you'll build a life that hides your light. You think you're making choices freely, but the wound is holding the pen. Most people never see it. They grow older but live inside the same emotional weather as their childhood. The same longing, the same fear, the same ache to prove something that should have been freely given. They think they're reacting to the present, but they're really reenacting the past. Every argument, every heartbreak, every disappointment becomes another scene in the same old story. And the story will keep playing until you notice who's writing it. The moment you start to ask, what is this really reminding me of? Everything begins to shift. That's the doorway out of unconscious repetition. You begin to see that your partner isn't your parent, your boss isn't your old teacher, your friend isn't your childhood rival. They're just actors in a script. Your wound keeps directing. Awareness lets you rewrite the role. It's painful at first. Facing the original hurt feels like reopening a scar. But you can't heal what you keep pretending didn't happen. When you allow yourself to feel what the younger you never could, the story starts to change. The wound stops being an author and becomes a teacher. It stops demanding attention through pain and begins offering wisdom through understanding. The truth is, the wound has never been against you. It was your psyche's way of surviving in a world that didn't yet know how to hold you. It learned how to protect you, even if its methods now keep you stuck. Once you bring light to it, the wound no longer needs to repeat itself. It becomes part of your strength, part of your empathy, part of your depth. You stop living as the wounded child and start living as the conscious adult who can finally hold that child with love. And when that happens, the script changes on its own, not because the past disappears, but because you've stopped letting it write the future. Have you ever noticed how the same kind of person keeps showing up in your life? The one who doesn't listen, the one who leaves, the one who always needs saving. It's almost like you're stuck in a play, and no matter how many new actors arrive, they end up speaking the same lines. That isn't coincidence. It's the psyche's theater, and you're both the playwright and the audience. We all carry emotional roles written long ago. The wounded child, the rescuer, the invisible one, the overachiever. These roles form in childhood when we learn what earns love, what keeps peace, what prevents pain. We grow up, but the roles don't. They keep casting people who will help us replay the same old scenes until we finally see what we've been performing. Jung said that what we call fate is often just the unconscious seeking recognition. That's why the same emotional story repeats with different faces. The partner who makes you feel unworthy has the same emotional fingerprint as the parent who made you feel small. The friend who betrays your trust carries the same energy as the first person who broke it. Life keeps bringing back the same characters, not to punish you, but to reveal the script you're still following. Most people think, why do I always attract the same kind of person? But attraction isn't just chemistry, it's recognition. Your unconscious spots a familiar role and says, you'll help me finish what was left undone. It doesn't want comfort, it wants completion. And so, without realizing it, you keep casting the same type of soul to play the same emotional role, hoping this time the ending will be different. But it never is, at least not until you notice the pattern. Because as long as the story stays unconscious, it keeps directing your life from behind the curtain. When you finally see it, you begin to understand that every relationship you've ever had was your psyche speaking through others. The controlling boss, the distant friend, the unfaithful partner, they're all mirrors, performing the unhealed parts of you. When you see this clearly, something powerful happens. You stop blaming the cast. You realize They were reading from your script all along. And that realization gives you the freedom to rewrite the story. You no longer need the villain to feel powerless or the savior to feel worthy. You start choosing people from consciousness instead of compulsion. Awareness doesn't erase the play, it transforms it. The characters don't disappear, they evolve. The roles lose their grip, and for the first time, the story becomes yours to tell, not something that keeps telling you. The people in your life aren't coincidences. They are reflections, wearing costumes, helping you remember what's been forgotten. Once you understand that, the casting changes, the drama softens, and you finally realize the truth: no one has been repeating the story but you. There's a quiet puppeteer inside every human being, the invisible hand of the complex. It pulls the strings of your choices, shapes your reactions, and whispers lines you don't remember writing. You think you're in control, but half of what you call decision is really the unconscious trying to finish an old story. A complex is a cluster of emotion built around an early wound. It starts forming when something you needed wasn't met, love that felt conditional, attention that never came, fear that had nowhere to go. Those emotions don't vanish with time. They sink into the unconscious, still alive, still waiting. And from there, they begin to guide your fate, like an unseen author scripting your life behind the scenes. You can hear a complex speaking when your reaction doesn't match the situation. When someone ignores your message and you feel a sudden wave of panic. When a small criticism feels like rejection. When silence from a friend feels like abandonment. These moments seem irrational, but they're not, they're echoes. The present is striking a nerve that belongs to the past. Your inner child is still tugging the strings, saying, "Please, not again." Jung called complexes splinter psyches, parts of you that broke away and started living their own secret lives. They act like people inside you, each with their own agenda: the fearful one, the pleaser, the controller, the abandoned child. When they take over, you feel possessed because in that moment, you are. The adult disappears, and the child who once couldn't get what they needed steps forward, trying again in a new disguise. This is why life feels repetitive. Complexes attract situations that match their emotional frequency, hoping to resolve what was once unbearable. But without awareness, they just keep replaying it. You get close to someone and suddenly pull away. You crave freedom but keep choosing control. You want peace but create chaos. The pattern looks like fate, but it's actually familiarity. Your psyche would rather feel known pain than unknown possibility. The good news is that a complex loses power the moment you see it. When you can pause mid-reaction and ask, who's speaking right now, the adult or the child? You begin to loosen the strings. The awareness itself starts to heal the split. You don't fight the complex. You befriend it. You listen to what it's been trying to protect. That's when the invisible hand begins to relax. The puppeteer doesn't vanish, it becomes conscious. The child who once had to survive learns that the adult can now take care of things. And in that quiet recognition, fate starts to change shape. The truth is, the complex isn't your enemy. It's your history trying to find closure. When you meet it with understanding instead of resistance, you stop being pulled by the past and start living from the present. Betrayal cuts deeper than almost anything else. It shakes your sense of safety, your trust in others, even your trust in yourself. You replay what happened 100 times, wondering how someone could do that to you, how they could lie, leave, or turn cold. But underneath the pain is a question most people never think to ask. What if the betrayal isn't about them at all? What if it's your psyche, using another person to show you what you've been unwilling to see. Jung said that life will place people in your path who embody your unconscious traits, especially the ones you've disowned. The so-called enemy is often your own rejected self wearing someone else's face. The friend who deceived you may reflect the part of you that hides truth to stay safe. The partner who abandons you may reveal the part of you that's been abandoning your own needs for years. What hurts so deeply isn't just their action, it's the sudden meeting with a truth you've avoided. The mind resists this. It wants to divide the world into good and bad, victim and villain. But in the deeper layers of the psyche, there are no enemies, only mirrors. Every conflict, every heartbreak, every betrayal is an image of inner division projected outward. Life uses other people to stage your unconscious dramas, so that what you cannot face inside can be seen outside. When betrayal hits, it awakens the shadow. Rage, shame, jealousy, grief, all the emotions you've buried rise to the surface. The instinct is to attack or retreat, to protect the wound. But if you can pause and ask, what part of me does this person represent? Something shifts. You begin to see that they didn't just hurt you, they revealed you. They held up a mirror to the place where you still betray yourself. Self-betrayal hides in small moments: the times you said yes when your body said no, the times you silenced truth to keep the peace, the times you played small to stay loved. Each act teaches others how to treat you, not because you deserve it, but because energy repeats what it knows. When someone betrays you, they're often echoing the way you've been betraying your own boundaries. This doesn't excuse their actions. It gives you back your power. You stop being the helpless victim in someone else's story and become the conscious author of your own. Betrayal transforms from punishment into revelation. You realize it wasn't sent to break you, it was sent to wake you. The moment you see that every enemy is a mirror, the hatred begins to dissolve. Not because you forget, but because you understand. The enemy was never the real threat, unconsciousness was. And once you make the lesson conscious, betrayal loses its sting. What remains is clarity, strength, and a quiet gratitude for the mirror that finally showed you where you'd been missing yourself. Sometimes you meet someone and it feels electric. You can't stop thinking about them. They seem to glow with something you've been missing: confidence, mystery, creativity, freedom. You call it love, or fate, or chemistry. But beneath the magic, something deeper is happening. What you're seeing isn't them. It's you, the part of you that's been asleep, projected onto another person so you can finally see it come alive. Jung called this process anima, and anima's projection, the inner feminine or masculine energy we unconsciously cast onto people who embody what we've lost touch with. The person you can't stop thinking about is rarely your other half. They're your reflection, carrying a piece of your soul that you've forgotten how to claim. You're not in love with them. You're in love with your own potential mirrored through them. That's why infatuation feels both intoxicating and terrifying. It's not just attraction, it's recognition. Something in you whispers, "This is what I could be if I stopped holding back." You see in them what you secretly long to awaken within yourself. Their confidence stirs your hidden courage. Their warmth mirrors the love you've been denying. Their independence reminds you of the freedom you've been afraid to live. It's never really about the person. It's about the energy they represent. When that projection is unconscious, it can turn into obsession. You start believing you need them to feel whole, because for a moment, they carry your missing piece. But as soon as they stop behaving like the fantasy you've built, the illusion begins to crack. The godlike glow fades, and disappointment takes its place. That's not love dying, that's projection dissolving. The image of your unlived self is being taken back, piece by piece. It's painful to realize this, but it's also liberating. Because when the illusion breaks, what remains is an opportunity for real love. Not the kind that fills a void, but the kind that shares fullness. True love begins where projection ends. It's seeing another person clearly, without needing them to complete you. The next time someone fascinates you, pause before calling it destiny. Ask yourself, what quality do they carry that I've forgotten in myself? What part of me feels alive when I'm near them? Those questions turn infatuation into insight. They take the fantasy and make it useful, a doorway back to your own wholeness. The truth is, attraction isn't a spell cast by another person. It's a signal from your soul saying, look here, this is what you're ready to become. When you understand that, you stop chasing people who awaken you and start awakening yourself. The magic you thought lived in them was always yours. They were just the mirror that made you remember. The moment you begin to see that life is a mirror, something inside you resists. The ego doesn't like mirrors, it likes stories. Stories where you're right and they're wrong. Where life is unfair and you're just unlucky. Where pain is something that happens to you, not through you. The ego depends on those stories because they protect it from the one thing it fears most: self-recognition. When the mirror starts showing truth, the ego fights back. It points fingers, builds excuses, and hides behind defense. You'll notice it in the sentences that start with, if only they, or why does this always happen to me? Those thoughts keep you safe from the deeper truth that maybe, just maybe, the situation isn't against you. It's reflecting you. Jung said the ego is a necessary illusion, but an illusion nonetheless. It's the part of you that believes it's separate from the world, that everything outside you is unrelated to what's inside. So when the mirror begins to reveal your hidden patterns, the ego panics. It sees threat where there's only reflection. That's why awareness often feels uncomfortable at first. The old story starts to crumble, and the part of you built upon it feels like it's dying. The mind will do anything to keep that story alive. It will rationalize, blame, attack, even spiritualize its defenses. It will say, I'm just being realistic, when it's actually protecting denial. It will say, I deserve better, while refusing to see how it repeats the same pattern that creates the pain. The mirror becomes the enemy, not because it lies, but because it doesn't. But this struggle is sacred. It's a sign that awareness is doing its work. The ego must fight before it can surrender. The world will keep reflecting sharper truths until you finally stop resisting and start listening. Each trigger, each conflict, each disappointment is consciousness pushing back against illusion. The mirror isn't punishing you, it's insisting on your awakening. The turning point comes when you realize that defending the old story costs more than facing the truth. That the energy spent keeping the illusion alive could be used to grow. When you stop arguing with the mirror, you begin to see beauty, even in the uncomfortable reflections. You understand that every revelation, no matter how painful, is your psyche expanding into awareness. The ego won't disappear, it just learns its place. It becomes the servant of consciousness, not the ruler of it. And when that shift happens, the mirror no longer feels like an enemy. It becomes an ally, showing you what's real instead of what's convenient. The truth is, the mirror never fights. It only reflects. It's the ego that throws the punches, mistaking reflection for attack. But once you see that clearly, the fight ends on its own. What's left is peace, the kind that comes when you stop defending illusion and start embracing what's been true all along. You don't live in the world. You live inside your perception of it. Everything you call reality passes through a lens, and that lens is made of your memories, emotions, and beliefs. You never see things as they are. You see them as you are. This is what Jung meant by psychic reality, the inner world of thoughts and projections that feels as solid as the outer one. But most people never realize they're looking through a filter. They mistake their perception for truth. Think about it. Two people can experience the same event and walk away with completely different stories. One feels rejected, the other feels relieved. One sees cruelty, the other sees clarity. The difference isn't the event, it's the lens. Your mind colors every moment before you even have a chance to notice. Every opinion, every judgment, every fact is bent by the shape of your inner world. When you were young, your lens began forming. If love was conditional, your lens learned to look for rejection. If danger was common, your lens searched for threat. If you were praised only for being perfect, your lens filtered out anything messy or uncertain. These filters kept you safe once, but as you grow, they distort what's actually happening. You don't see people as they are. You see them through the ghost of what once hurt you. This is why so many arguments never resolve. Each person is fighting not the other, but their own projection of the other. Two distorted lenses colliding, both convinced they're seeing clearly. The tragedy is that no one realizes the real conflict is inside, not between. Life, however, has a way of testing the lens. You'll meet people who shatter your assumptions, experiences that don't fit your narrative, moments that feel bigger than your beliefs. The lens cracks, and in that crack, light enters. It's uncomfortable, even disorienting, but it's also how awareness expands. Every time the world surprises you, it's showing you where your perception was too narrow. The ego hates this. It wants certainty, control, clear villains and heroes. But the psyche moves toward wholeness, not comfort. It wants you to see beyond your distortion, to realize that most of what you call reality is a mirror of your own inner state. The chaos you see outside may be your unacknowledged fear. The coldness you feel from others may reflect your own emotional distance. The beauty you notice in the world may be your soul remembering itself. When you begin to see through the fractured lens instead of through it, something shifts. You no longer assume your perception is truth, you treat it as a clue. You start to ask, what in me is shaping this view? And that question alone begins to clear the glass. Slowly, life starts to look different, not because the world has changed, but because your eyes have. The distortion softens, the reflections become clearer, and for the first time, you glimpse reality not as your mind imagines it, but as your consciousness experiences it, vast, fluid, and quietly whole. Imagine sitting in a dark theater, completely absorbed in a film. The music swells, the story twists, the characters make you laugh and cry. You forget where you are. Then, somewhere near the end, a strange realization dawns. You recognize the handwriting in the credits. The names, the script, the direction, all yours. You didn't just watch the movie, you made it. That's what awakening feels like. For most of your life, you've been so lost in the story that you forgot you were the one creating it. You thought you were the victim of circumstances, the hero of chance, the product of luck or fate. But every scene, every relationship, every turning point has been filmed through the camera of your psyche. The outer world is the screen. The inner world is the projector. And the film that's your unconscious playing your life on loop until you recognize yourself behind the lens. At first, this truth is hard to swallow. It challenges everything the ego wants to believe. Because if you're the filmmaker, you can't keep blaming the characters for their roles. You can't keep hating the plot twists you secretly wrote. You realize that what you've been calling bad luck was really the unconscious choosing its own story arc, repeating, reshaping, refining, until the lesson came into focus. It doesn't mean you consciously chose every event. The unconscious doesn't ask permission. It creates from what's unresolved. The heartbreak, the betrayal, the missed opportunity. These weren't punishments. They were scenes designed to wake you up to the themes you keep avoiding. Your life is the masterpiece of your unfinished self, always trying to become whole through its own storytelling. Jung said that the psyche produces symbols to lead the conscious mind toward what it refuses to see. The world is full of these symbols, disguised as coincidences, recurring dreams, emotional triggers, or impossible synchronicities. They're not random. They're edits and cuts from your own director's hand, reminding you that the movie is being filmed inside you, not outside. The shift happens when you stop asking, "Why did this happen to me?" and start asking, "What part of me created this scene?" That question turns life into dialogue. Suddenly, even the pain makes sense. It's just a message from the filmmaker trying to guide the viewer home. Once you see it, you can't unsee it. The world still moves. The story still unfolds. But now you watch with awareness. You notice the color, the framing, the rhythm, your rhythm running through it all. You don't cling to scenes or curse them for ending. You understand that the movie was never meant to trap you. It was meant to reveal you. And maybe the greatest secret of all is this: you were never just the filmmaker or the viewer. You were the light running through both the consciousness that makes the whole story visible. There comes a point on every seeker's path when the teacher appears. Sometimes it's a person, sometimes a book, sometimes a moment that feels charged with meaning, a phrase that lands perfectly, a coincidence that feels impossible. You feel guided, seen, awakened. But here's the twist most people never realize. What you're meeting in that teacher is your own wisdom reflected back at you. They aren't giving you something new. They're showing you what you already carry inside. Jung called this transference the projection of inner wisdom onto an outer figure. When you're ready to grow, your psyche creates someone to mirror the part of you that already knows how. The mentor's words only awaken what's been sleeping. The truth feels profound not because it's foreign, but because it's familiar. It's like hearing your own voice coming from another mouth. That's why a single sentence can change your life, while 1,000 others pass unnoticed. The ones that strike you aren't random. They match the frequency of your readiness. The teacher, the quote, the sign from the universe, all serve the same purpose: to help you recognize what you've forgotten you know. It's easy to give your power away to those mirrors. You might think, "They're wiser than me, I need them to guide me." But that's part of the illusion. The moment you elevate the teacher above yourself, you miss the real lesson that your psyche created them to make your own wisdom visible. The more you grow, the more you outgrow the need for them. That isn't betrayal, it's integration. Even spiritual signs work this way. You see repeating numbers, overhear the perfect sentence, or stumble upon a symbol that feels divine. It feels as if the universe is speaking to you, and in a way, it is. But the voice you're hearing is your own unconscious communicating through the language of the outer world. The world is the chalkboard your soul writes on. This is why the best teachers are the ones who point you back to yourself. They don't give you answers. They ask better questions. They don't lead you. They remind you of your direction. They become transparent, like windows, until you no longer look at them but through them. Jung once said, "The privilege of a lifetime is to become who you truly are." Every true mentor's purpose is to lead you to that realization and then disappear. One day, you'll reread an old book that once changed your life and wonder why it doesn't hit the same. It's not because the book lost its magic, it's because you absorbed it. The mirror no longer needs to reflect what's already been reclaimed. In the end, there are no teachers who teach. There are only mirrors that help you remember. Every voice of wisdom you've ever admired has been your own, echoing through the world, patiently waiting for you to recognize its tone. The mind loves explanations. It builds entire worlds out of ideas, connecting every pain to a reason and every feeling to a theory. It believes that if it can just understand what's wrong, it can fix it. But understanding is not the same as seeing, and seeing is not the same as feeling. You can spend years explaining your pain and never actually touch it. That's the prison of explanation, the place where you talk about transformation instead of experiencing it. Jung warned that intellectual insight without emotional integration is a trap. The ego hides behind clever understanding to avoid true contact with the unconscious. You can analyze your childhood, label your patterns, memorize every quote about healing, but until you feel what those words point to, nothing changes. The wound doesn't care how much you know about it, it only softens when it's felt. We live in an age obsessed with knowledge. We read, we study, we dissect ourselves like puzzles. But emotion isn't a concept you can solve. It's energy that wants to move. To heal, you must let it be experienced, not explained. That means sitting with the ache in your chest, without turning it into a theory. It means letting your hands shake, your heart race, your tears fall not because you understand why, but because your body remembers what your mind forgot. The psyche doesn't speak in logic. It speaks in images, sensations, symbols, and dreams. When you try to meet it only through intellect, it stays silent. But when you meet it through presence, through breath, through feeling, through stillness, it begins to open. The truths that come from that space don't arrive as sentences. They arrive as knowing. This is why real change feels less like solving and more like surrender. It's the moment the mind stops running from the body and finally lets the body tell its story. The moment a tear explains more than 1,000 thoughts. The moment you stop asking, "Why am I like this?" and start whispering, "This is what it feels like." Understanding should lead to embodiment, not replace it. The mind is a beautiful tool, but it was never meant to do the heart's job. The intellect can point toward the truth, but only feeling can walk you there. Jung called this integration, when knowledge descends from the head into the soul and becomes part of who you are. The freedom you seek isn't found in perfect explanations. It's found in direct experience, when awareness finally meets sensation, when the story stops and the body speaks. Only then does insight become transformation. Until that moment, every answer is just another cage, the illusion of control disguised as understanding. The mind may love its theories, but the soul only trusts what has been felt. There comes a point when the story you've been telling about yourself starts to fall apart. The identity you've built, the roles you've played, the goals you've chased, suddenly they stop making sense. The achievements that once defined you feel empty. The relationships that once gave you purpose lose their shape. It feels like something inside you is breaking, but what's actually breaking is the story. The ego needs a storyline to feel safe. It needs to believe, "This is who I am, This is where I'm going. This is what it means. But life doesn't follow the script. Eventually, the narrative reaches a moment it can't explain. A failure, a loss, an awakening, a silence too deep to name. And in that silence, the ego panics. Without the story, it doesn't know who it is. Jung experienced this himself during what he called his confrontation with the unconscious. The outer structure of his life collapsed, and the inner world flooded in. He realized that the breakdown of the story isn't a mistake, it's an initiation. When the ego's version of life dissolves, the deeper self finally has room to speak. The collapse is not the end of the journey, it's the door to the real one. At first, this process feels like dying. You can't cling to the old plot anymore, and yet the new one hasn't appeared. You stand in the ruins of what used to define you, the titles, the goals, the relationships, and feel lost. But that emptiness is sacred. It's the space between chapters, where truth begins to breathe again. The self doesn't speak through certainty. It speaks through stillness. When the story collapses, you start seeing how much of your life was shaped by fear. Fear of rejection, fear of failure, fear of not being enough. You realize the character you've been playing was never you. It was the mask you wore to survive the script. And when that mask falls, you meet yourself not as a role, but as awareness itself. This is the beginning of individuation, the shift from living as the story to living as the storyteller. You no longer need to control the plot. You begin to trust the unfolding. You start noticing that even in the chaos, something steady watches from behind the scenes. Something that doesn't collapse when everything else does. That's the deeper self. Silent, vast, unshaken. Eventually, the pain of losing the story turns into gratitude. You see that what broke wasn't your life. It was the illusion of control. The collapse was never destruction. It was revelation. The ego writes stories to feel safe. The self doesn't need stories, it just is. And when you finally let the old narrative die, you realize you haven't lost yourself at all. You've only lost the mask that was never you. What remains is truth raw, present, and quietly infinite. At some point on the path inward, language begins to fail. Logic bends. Time dissolves. You can't think your way through what's happening anymore, because what's happening isn't of the mind. It's deeper, older, the place Jung called the confrontation with the unconscious. It's where the rational world fades, and the dream world takes over. You don't enter it by choice. It enters you. Here, truth doesn't speak in words. It speaks in images, strange, powerful, and alive. You might start dreaming of falling through endless rooms, of meeting mysterious figures, of walking through water or fire that feels both terrifying and holy. The unconscious communicates this way because it has no language. It shows you what you can't yet say. Every image, no matter how absurd, carries meaning. A burning house might reveal your psyche's desire to transform. A locked door might represent the part of you you've refused to open. When Jung began to explore this inner landscape, he called it his descent into the depths. He found that the unconscious is not darkness, it's imagination itself, waiting to be met. The figures that appear: the child, the shadow, the wise old man, the animal, are all fragments of your psyche, wearing symbolic forms. They are not illusions, they are messages. But the confrontation is not gentle. The ego feels threatened by what it can't control. It tries to interpret, categorize, or dismiss the experience. But the unconscious cannot be tamed by reason. It asks for surrender, not analysis. It demands that you feel, not just think. The more you resist, the more chaotic it becomes. But the moment you accept its language, image, emotion, sensation, order begins to emerge from the chaos. It's like learning to read dreams while awake. You start noticing symbols in your everyday life, a bird landing beside you when you're ready to be free, a broken clock when time feels suspended, repeating numbers when awareness tries to speak. These aren't superstitions. They're reflections of the same inner world spilling into the outer one. The confrontation with the unconscious is the turning point of transformation. It's where you stop trying to control your psyche and start collaborating with it. You realize that every vision, every nightmare, every synchronicity is your deeper self reaching upward, trying to become conscious through you. It can be disorienting, even frightening, to face what's been buried. But if you hold steady, if you witness rather than run, the darkness begins to reveal its light. The monsters become teachers. The chaos becomes art. The dream becomes a dialogue between who you thought you were and who you've always been. When you emerge from this realm, you're never quite the same. You see that reality itself is a kind of dream, shaped not by facts, but by symbols. And once you learn to read them, you realize that the unconscious was never against you. It was just waiting for you to listen in its language. There comes a moment, usually after everything you thought you were has started to unravel, when a quiet awareness begins to stir. It doesn't speak, but it sees. It doesn't judge, but it notices. It's there in the pauses between thoughts, behind every emotion, beneath every mask. This is the witness, the part of you that experiences everything without becoming anything. Jung described it as the self, the center that holds while the rest of the psyche shifts and storms. It's the still point around which the chaos turns. For most of your life, you've been identified with the content of consciousness, the anger, the joy, the roles, the stories. You said, I am this thought, I am this feeling, I am this problem. But now, something deeper begins to realize. I am the one who is aware of them. That shift changes everything. You start noticing how much energy you've spent being pulled into every passing wave, defending an opinion, clinging to an identity, drowning in an emotion as if it defined you. The witness doesn't fight the waves. It watches them. It knows the waves are not the ocean. This awareness isn't distant or cold. It's deeply compassionate. It watches the parts of you that struggle and suffer without turning away. When the inner critic starts shouting, the witness simply observes it, and in that gentle seeing, the critic loses its power. When fear rises, the witness doesn't try to erase it. It holds it in silence until it softens. This is the beginning of real freedom, the ability to stay present without being possessed by what passes through. At first, the ego resists this new position. It feels invisible when it's not at the center. It tries to pull you back into drama, anything to feel real again. But the more you rest in awareness, the more you see that the ego is just another wave on the surface. It's not the enemy. It's part of the show. The difference is that now you know it's a performance, not reality. This awakening doesn't remove pain, but it changes your relationship to it. Sorrow still moves through you, but it no longer becomes you. Anger still burns, but it doesn't consume. You realize you can experience everything without being reduced to it. You are not the sadness. You are the space that allows sadness to exist. You are not the fear. You are the awareness in which fear arises and dissolves. When the witness awakens, life becomes lighter, clearer. The highs and lows remain, but they pass through a sky that no longer storms. The self you used to defend starts to fade, And what remains is simple presence, a steady seeing that doesn't need to control or explain. And in that stillness, you understand what you've been searching for all along: the awareness that never leaves, the silence that watches everything come and go. You were never the character in the story. You were the screen it played upon. There's a moment in every awakening when the question changes. Until then, life feels like a series of unfair events: people hurting you, chances slipping away, problems piling up. The story goes, "I didn't deserve this. Why me?" You replay it over and over, trying to find someone or something to blame. But blame is a circle. It keeps you walking the same path, feeling powerless while calling it understanding. Then one day, something shifts. The pain doesn't lessen, but your perspective does. Instead of asking, "Why me?" a quieter question rises: "What part of me is this?" That single question turns the entire story inside out. You stop seeing yourself as a victim of the world and start seeing yourself as a participant in your own unconscious creation. The pattern you thought was punishment begins to look like a message. Jung said that outer events are the language of the psyche. What you call coincidence or cruelty is often your unconscious trying to get your attention. When you experience betrayal, maybe it's revealing your own self-betrayal. When you face rejection, maybe it's showing you the part of you that's still rejecting yourself. The world becomes less like a battlefield and more like a classroom. At first, this awareness stings. The ego resists because it means giving up its favorite role, the innocent sufferer. But victimhood, though comforting in its simplicity, is a cage. It keeps you small, waiting for rescue. The moment you ask, "What is this teaching me?" you walk out of that cage. You stop needing the world to change before you do. You start using every challenge as material for growth. This doesn't mean excusing harm or pretending everything is your fault. It means seeing that every experience, even the painful ones, is revealing something about your psyche that's ready to come into consciousness. You realize that every difficult person, every closed door, every loss is a mirror showing you where you're still asleep. The shift from victim to student is the beginning of empowerment. You move from helplessness to curiosity, from resentment to awareness. Instead of running from discomfort, you turn toward it. Instead of asking life to be easier, you ask to see more clearly. And clarity, not comfort, becomes the new freedom. Eventually, you begin to thank the very experiences you once cursed. The heartbreak that made you softer, the failure that humbled you, the rejection that led you home to yourself. You understand that nothing was wasted, everything was instruction. When you stop asking, "Why me?" and start asking, "What part of me is this?" you begin to cooperate with your own evolution. Life stops feeling like it's happening to you and starts feeling like it's happening for you and through you. The teacher was never outside. It was the lesson hidden inside every moment, waiting for you to notice you were the student all along. Real wholeness begins the moment you stop choosing sides within yourself. For most of your life, you've been taught to chase the light and run from the dark, to celebrate what looks good and hide what feels shameful. You called one side me and the other not me. But the psyche doesn't care about your preferences. It wants all of you. Jung called this the integration of opposites, the process of holding both light and shadow without collapsing into either. The human mind loves division. It says, "I'm kind, not cruel. I'm calm, not angry. I'm strong, not afraid." But every quality contains its opposite. Kindness without boundaries becomes self-erasure. Calmness without honesty turns to repression. Strength without vulnerability hardens into armor. To become whole, you must learn to stand in the space where contradictions meet, not to choose, but to include. This is what Jung meant by holding the tension of the opposites. It's the ability to feel both love and anger at once, both courage and fear, both faith and doubt, without needing to escape into one or the other. It's uncomfortable. The ego hates paradox. It wants to resolve, define, label. But the soul expands through contradiction. Growth doesn't happen in comfort. It happens in tension. You'll notice this in your relationships. You'll feel love and resentment, admiration and envy, connection and distance, and your mind will rush to decide which feeling is true. But both are true. Every person is a mirror of both your light and your shadow. Integration means allowing the full spectrum of emotion without turning it into judgment. The same applies inwardly. You can hold the part of you that wants to evolve and the part that wants to hide, the confident adult and the frightened child, the spiritual seeker and the skeptic. You don't have to pick one to be authentic. You are the container that can hold them all. The moment you stop rejecting the parts that don't fit your ideal image, peace begins to return. The dark isn't the enemy of the light. It's its foundation. You can't have one without the other. The light gives vision, the dark gives depth. Together they form truth. When you accept both, life stops swinging like a pendulum between extremes and begins to move with balance. This doesn't mean surrendering to chaos. It means recognizing that every quality you admire and every quality you fear are both ingredients of your humanity. The goal isn't purity, it's completeness. When you can stand between opposites without losing your center, something miraculous happens. The tension doesn't tear you apart, it forges you. You become the bridge between light and dark, heaven and earth, conscious and unconscious. And in that still point between them, you discover who you truly are. Not one side or the other, but the awareness vast enough to hold them both. At some point, after all the mirrors and patterns have shown their faces, you realize something simple but world-shifting. No one is coming to save you, and no one is truly to blame. Every reflection, every hurt, every gift has been your psyche showing itself through the world. The moment you see that clearly, responsibility returns not as guilt, but as power. For most of life, responsibility feels heavy. It sounds like fault. But Jung meant something very different. To own your projections is to reclaim the energy you've scattered across the world, the anger placed on others, the admiration placed on heroes, the love placed on those who made you feel whole. All of it belongs to you. Every judgment, every longing, every trigger is your energy in exile. Responsibility is simply bringing it home. At first, this feels almost impossible. You've spent years blaming circumstances, waiting for someone else to change, convincing yourself that life would be fine if only they hadn't, if only it hadn't. But those sentences give away your power. The more you point outward, the smaller you become. The more you turn inward, the freer you feel. Because once you own that, your reactions are yours, not anyone else's. You can finally do something with them. Owning projection doesn't mean ignoring injustice or excusing harm. It means recognizing that how you respond is always within your domain. The outer world may trigger pain, but the inner world decides whether that pain becomes awareness or bitterness. You can't control the mirror, but you can choose how to interpret the reflection. When you take back projection, you stop living reactively. You no longer wait for closure, apology, or recognition from others. You begin giving those things to yourself. You understand that forgiveness isn't something you do for someone, it's what happens when you stop expecting them to fix a wound they didn't create. You take back the authority to heal. Jung said that the process of individuation is the movement from outer dependency to inner authority. That's what responsibility really is, becoming the authority of your own experience. When you stop blaming, you start creating. When you stop projecting, you start perceiving. Life no longer feels like something happening to you, but something happening through you. And here's the paradox: once you truly own your part, compassion for others naturally follows. You see that everyone else is trapped in their own projections too, fighting mirrors they don't yet recognize. Judgment softens, not because you've become morally superior, but because you've met your own reflection enough times to understand. Taking responsibility isn't punishment, it's liberation. It's the point when you gather back the power you gave away to enemies, lovers, fate, and fear, and finally say, "This is my life. These are my patterns. This is my creation." And when you speak those words not from shame, but from truth, the mirror stops being a maze, it becomes a window. You no longer need the world to reflect your unconscious, because you've begun to see it yourself. There comes a subtle moment on the journey when the noise begins to fade. The familiar chaos of repetition, the same arguments, the same heartbreaks, the same disappointments, starts to lose its grip. You can feel the pattern still moving, but it's slower now, almost hesitant, as if life itself is waiting to see what you'll do next. This is the quiet between repetitions, the space where awareness begins to interrupt fate. It doesn't feel dramatic. There's no fireworks, no clear ending. It feels more like a pause, like the moment after an exhale when everything is still. You watch a situation unfold that once would have swallowed you whole, but this time, you notice it instead of becoming it. The emotion rises, but you don't react. The story appears, but you don't enter it. Something has changed. The loop hasn't vanished, but it's no longer unconscious. This is what Jung meant when he said that the process of making the unconscious conscious transforms destiny into choice. Awareness doesn't erase your old patterns overnight. It simply gives you the power to see them as they arise. The seeing itself begins to dissolve them. Every time you recognize a projection instead of fighting it, the energy returns to you. Every time you feel an emotion without needing to blame someone, the cycle weakens. Awareness becomes the still point that the repetition can't touch. You start to notice how quiet this awareness feels, not numb, not detached, just peaceful. It doesn't judge the pattern, it observes it with patience. When you catch yourself reacting, it doesn't scold you, it simply watches, and in that watchfulness, you return to the present moment. The loop lives in time, but awareness lives outside of it. Sometimes this quiet feels strange, even empty. The drama that once defined your life begins to fade, and without it, the ego feels lost. It wonders, if I'm not struggling, who am I? But that emptiness is sacred. It's the silence that appears when the projector stops running, when the movie slows, and the light on the screen begins to soften. In this space, you begin to meet life as it is, not as your patterns imagine it. You hear the world again, the sound of your breath, the rustle of leaves, the pulse beneath your ribs. Everything feels alive, unfiltered. The old scenes no longer demand your energy. You can finally respond instead of repeat. The quiet between repetitions isn't the end of the story. It's the birth of consciousness. It's the point where the psyche pauses long enough for you to step off the wheel and stand beside it. The loops don't vanish completely. They simply lose the power to define you. And in that stillness, something begins to dawn. You realize that freedom isn't about escaping the pattern. It's about seeing it so clearly that it can no longer run your life without your consent. The silence that follows isn't emptiness, it's peace. The kind of peace that only arrives once you've stopped spinning and started seeing. You spend most of your life searching for meaning, for purpose, for peace, for the feeling that something finally makes sense. You move from book to book, teacher to teacher, relationship to relationship, chasing the next realization that might complete you. Every discovery feels close, but never quite enough. You glimpse truth for a moment, then lose it again like a dream that fades as soon as you wake. You start to wonder if you'll ever arrive. But there comes a point, often quietly, when the search begins to fall apart. The question that once drove you, "What am I missing?" starts to lose its urgency. The more you look, the more you realize that every answer leads back to another question. And then, like a flicker of light in a dark room, something lands. The seeker and the sought have never been separate. You've been searching for yourself through everything that isn't you. Jung said that what we call the search for meaning is often the unconscious trying to reunite with the conscious mind. The part of you that feels lost is just the part that forgot it was never alone. Every teacher, every experience, every heartbreak was your own psyche trying to guide you back to this realization. The treasure you've been chasing wasn't buried in the world, it was buried in awareness. At first, this realization feels almost anticlimactic. You expect enlightenment to arrive with trumpets, but it comes as stillness. You notice that the drive to fix, to heal, to become someone better has softened. You don't feel done, you just feel home. You stop needing to improve what was never broken. You see that the journey wasn't about reaching something new, but about remembering what's always been true. The seeker dissolves when the seeing becomes whole. There's nothing left to chase, because everything is already part of what you are. The beauty, the pain, the confusion, all of it belongs. Awareness doesn't need to find itself. It only needs to recognize itself. And that recognition is the end of the seeking game. This doesn't mean life becomes empty or meaningless. In fact, it becomes more alive than ever. You still read, love, create, explore, but not from hunger, from fullness. The search becomes play. The path becomes art. You move through the world not looking for answers, but expressing the understanding that you are the answer. The mind might whisper, "Surely there must be more." But you smile because you finally understand that more is another disguise for not yet. You no longer chase the horizon because you've realized the horizon moves with you. In the end, there was never anything to find. There was only the forgetting and the remembering, the long, beautiful loop of consciousness, pretending to be lost just so it could feel the joy of being found. And now that you've seen it, the game ends where it began in you. At the end of the journey, something subtle but profound happens. The circle closes, but it no longer binds you. You begin to see life not as a prison of repeating patterns, but as a living dance of consciousness playing with itself. Every struggle, every heartbreak, every so-called mistake was never working against you. It was life's way of reflecting you back to yourself. The pattern was never the problem. Forgetting that you were, the pattern was. Jung said that enlightenment isn't about becoming perfect, but about becoming whole. Wholeness arrives the moment you stop trying to escape the loop and instead recognize that you are the loop. You were the seeker and the sought, the student and the teacher, the wound and the healer, the darkness and the light. Every role you played was consciousness exploring its own depths through you. What once felt like fate now feels like play, a divine rhythm repeating until it's finally heard as music. The pattern doesn't vanish with awakening. It continues, but it no longer defines you. You still feel emotion, still face conflict, still walk through uncertainty, but something essential has changed. You don't mistake the movement for meaning. You can witness the rise and fall of experiences without being carried away by them. Awareness stays steady while life flows through it. The dream keeps dreaming, but you are the dreamer. This realization doesn't inflate you, it humbles you. You see that everything, even what you once resisted, has been part of the same intelligence guiding you toward itself. The betrayals taught trust. The losses taught presence. The repetitions taught consciousness. Every scene in your story was love in disguise. Love wearing the mask of challenge, trying to wake itself up through you. And so, you no longer fight what comes. You no longer chase what leaves. You begin to live as awareness itself. Simple, spacious, awake. The mirror remains, but the war with reflection ends. The world doesn't need to change for you to feel free, because you see now that you are the world seeing itself. When you look back, you can trace the thread from the first moment of confusion to the final moment of clarity and realize it was all one continuous motion. Every loop, every return, every repetition was consciousness finding its way home. You don't awaken by escaping the cycle. You awaken by remembering that there was never anything to escape. The loop was never a trap. It was a mirror, spinning until you recognized your own face. Now, the story softens into silence. The searching stops. The mirror dissolves into light. What remains is simple awareness, timeless, wordless, free, watching itself through the gentle movement of life.